How you guys doing? This is Rock Bottom of the Dawn. I'm Perruco. After this video, you ain't gonna have more doubts about UFOs or UAPs or whatever name they gave them. Let's get into it.
I didn't believe in UFOs until London Control called us in the winter of 1962 and asked us, would we chase one?
Their testimony would make history.
I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it. And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would panic the public.
This was the most watched event in the history of the National Press Club.
We actually did recoveries of crashed saucers. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive.
It marks the beginning of the global disclosure movement.
These discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles.
15 years later, Dr. Stephen Greer opened his archives of documents and interviews.
This information was refused to the President of the United States by the Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr.
They reveal the true story of the secrecy and of disclosure.
There is no evidence, I wish to emphasize, that these life forms from elsewhere are hostile towards us. But there is a great deal of evidence that they are concerned with our hostility.
Yeah, right there. The government's always trying to make us think that there's a few species, but they cannot all be bad. Most of them are good. If they're that intelligence, do you think they still believe in violence? No. Just keep going.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there?
Astronauts Gordon Cooper and Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Yes, there have been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there have been material and bodies recovered, and there is some group of people somewhere that may or may not be associated with government at this point, but certainly were at one time, that have this knowledge and have been attempting to conceal this knowledge.
We walked over to one side of the lab and he said, by the way, we've discovered a base on the back side of the moon. And I said, whose? What do you mean, whose?
Well, let's see, we've had visitors again. Yeah. Probably worth mentioning. Okay.
And then he pulled out one of these mosaics and showed this base, which had geometric shapes. There were towers, there were spherical buildings. There were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes, but they were large structures. And at that point, I became frightened and I was a little terrified, thinking to myself that anybody walks in the room now, I know we're in jeopardy, we're in trouble, because he shouldn't be giving me this information.
Ability regarding UFOs, and to produce the greatest possible enlightenment of the subject. Former President Gerald Ford.
I am prepared to state that I have been at locations where craft of unknown origin that did not originate on the face of this planet was there. I am prepared to state that while I was there, we saw living, dead bodies of entities that were not born on this planet. I am prepared to state that we had what they referred to as interfacing with those entities.
The question is, who are people like Carl Sagan, and before him, Professor Donald Menzel? It turns out that Sagan, in his early career, actually spoke and wrote about UFOs in a way that was affirmative, that it was legitimate. After he was threatened by the intelligence community and blackmailed, he then began to debunk the issue. Skepticism is very healthy, and I'm a big skeptic about more than 90% of the information out there on the subject, which the public needs to be skeptical. However, skepticism is not just blindly denying everything that's legitimate. For example, we have 3,500 cases where extraterrestrial vehicles have landed and left physical traces. We have 4,000 cases where they have been tracked on radar and seen by pilots. We have an enormous amount of photo and video evidence and physical evidence. And in our last project, brought out an actual body that is most likely not of human origin. So the question...
5,000 and 4,000 and an unlimited amount of numbers of other in a different category. But you listen to what he said, you still have to be skeptic because there's a lot of faker going on these days. It's crazy. And it pisses me off, to tell you the truth.
Becomes, what is the metric for the evidence? Well, the evidence is actually overwhelming. There's more evidence for UFOs than there are for black holes, most of the theories in astrophysics, most of the evidence for most of the medicines you take. I'm speaking now as a trauma doctor. And yet, we have this blockage in the mainstream media and scientific establishment saying, where is the evidence?
What do we know? We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
Of course, flying saucers are real, and they are interplanetary. Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding.
When I was 8 or 9, I saw one of these objects.
What more evidence you guys need? Like, honestly. Like, it's in history. It's like, I don't understand.
Broad daylight. There was a beautiful, seamless disc in a blue sky, back when the skies were very blue. And I was with some boys in the neighborhood, and we saw this. I went, oh my God, they're real. We saw a UFO. Now, my parents said, oh, well, you're just a kid. But I became completely absorbed in this. So my interest in this goes back to my childhood. The Disclosure Project was an accident of history. In 1990, I formed the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence to form a diplomatic corps to make peaceful contact with these civilizations. Because once you conclude that they're real and they're of interstellar origin, the next question is, what are we going to do about it? And so I concluded what we should be doing about it is not militarizing the relationship, but having sort of a citizens' diplomacy effort, much like the Physicians for Social Responsibility, who were going to the Soviet Union to create a dialogue during the coldest days of the Cold War. There was no one at the United Nations or State Department or any foreign ministry dealing with it. So we started a set of protocols to make contact. And sure enough, we had some spectacular successes.
Holy damn hot shit. Dog. Thank you.
This got kicked up to the intelligence community. So by 1992, I was getting visits from the head of Army Intelligence, people inside the National Security Agency, and other three-lettered agencies. My intention was never to get involved with trying to disclose this issue. My interest was in this whole concept of making contact for peaceful purposes to advance our civilization from a planetary civilization to an interplanetary civilization. That was really the heart of my sincere interest. But along that way, and eventually a man who was friends with the director of the CIA, by the time Clinton became president, who said, you're going to be the first person to brief the director of Central Intelligence and the Clinton administration on this, because they have made inquiries and they have been lied to, which I did not believe. I mean, he was that blunt about it. This is really where I then went down the rabbit hole.
So can the government keep a secret this big? One of the biggest weapons in the intelligence community's arsenal is our general belief that the U.S. government couldn't possibly keep a secret this big from the American public.
So these unacknowledged special access projects do not care what your rank and position is. They care about one thing. Will you go along with their agenda? And this is exactly what happened when I met with Lord Hill Norton.
Since my name has become...
Will you play dumb, basically?
Connected with UFO matters in quite a big way in this country. I have frequently been asked why a person of my background, a former chief of the defense staff, a former chairman of the NATO Military Committee, what the reasons may be for governments wishing to cover up the facts about UFOs. That, I believe, is because governments fear that if they did disclose those facts, people would panic.
The only thing he really wanted to know was, I was head of the Ministry of Defense, head of the Military Committee for NATO, head of MI5, MI6. Why wouldn't they have told me? And I said, well, sir, with all due respect, what would you have done if you'd found out that there was a project that was illegal, engaged in assassinations, that was keeping from not only our leaders and our constitutionally required oversight, technologies and information that would enable us to have a whole new civilization on this planet without pollution or dependency on Mideast oil or what have you. And he says, I wouldn't have stood for it for a bloody minute. And he was just in a rage about it. I said, that's why they didn't tell you. Within a couple months of me briefing the CIA director, I get a visit from one of Bill Clinton's good friends to my home who says, they love what you're recommending, that the president do executive orders to declassify and bring all this information out. This man comes to my house and says, they really think that's a great idea. The president won't do it, it's too dangerous. And I said, well, he's the president. He didn't want to be president, he shouldn't have taken on the responsibility and sworn an oath to the Constitution. And he says, yeah, but you don't understand. They don't think that they can protect the president. And I said, what do you mean? And he's sitting at the dinner table with my children. And he says, well, they're concerned that President Clinton will end up like Jack Kennedy. And I start laughing. I really started laughing out loud because I thought this is nonsense. This is like conspiracy kookville. He says, no, this is absolutely their concern, is that if he pushes on this, he is in mortal peril.
Kennedy may have been engaged in a bit of a struggle with the CIA in attempting to get more information on the UFO subject, and that might account for his termination.
And that morning, in two of the English-speaking newspapers, there was a picture of two UFOs. So I had placed those on his table where he was going to be sitting, and I said, good morning, Mr. President. I sat him down and said, we'd like to have coffee and juice, and he said yes. So while I was getting that, he's looking at the papers. I came back in, President Kennedy says, well, what do you think? I looked at him, I looked down at the picture, and I says, well, sir, what do you think? And with that magnificent grin of his, he said, I asked you first. I said, from what I've learned, we can't be the only living beings in God's creation. And he says, you're right, young man. There is considerable knowledge as far as the actual being of UFO and ET phenomena that we're aware of today.
I am convinced that UFOs exist because I've seen one.
Really naive.
President Jimmy Carter.
When President Carter was elected, I was the legal counsel for the Jesuit National Headquarters in Washington, D.C. He called the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, George H.W. Bush, to a meeting and asked Bush if, as the director of Central Intelligence, would give to Carter, as the president-elect, all the information he had on the potential existence of extraterrestrial life and the issue of whether or not any of the UFO vehicles might be vehicles from another star system. And George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. Said he'd have to go to Congress and get Congress to have the Congressional Research Service at the Library of Congress declassify it, to get it to him if he was going to get it. That's a true story.
In some of these cases, absolutely, the president has no need to know because he's a temporary employee. He's strictly a temporary employee. He does not have a need to know on some of these deeper black programs within the Skunk Works, within the Boeing Phantom Works, and also within the Black Widow Group of Northrop.
Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress, their Science and Technology Division, based on all the information classified and declassified that they have reviewed, their projection was that there were at least from 2 to 6 other highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but non-human civilizations just in our Milky Way galaxy.
There was...
Imagine that, and they can get to us. They've been here.
Deep concern that something this important would be kept out of the briefings for the president. My sort of coming of age, which was hard, It's hard talking about this. I'm trying to say, I was a young doctor, asked to do something like this. Sorry.
If you guys just knew what he's been through, a doctor had to get involved in this. Because there's too many spineless out there. Sad, man. I feel bad for him. At the same time, I respect this man. He's got the, you know what?
Doctor in an ER taking care of shootings and stabbings and car wrecks. And I'm being asked to brief the CIA director on stuff because he and the president are being lied to? What? You know, are you, I said, are you fucking crazy? It was terrible. Frankly, it was devastating. Initially, I have to admit, the CIA director, I thought, to be honest with you, that he was sort of picking my brain to find out what I knew, as opposed to really not knowing. By the time the 3-hour meeting was over, it was quite clear that the emperor had no clothes. He later denied the meeting had happened for a briefing. This is a wonderful thing. Now, people say, how could he write this letter basically saying that this meeting and what I said about it was a distortion of the truth? I said, because he didn't realize there was a record beforehand. And thank God, I saved the document that is the original invitation. And in that letter, it is explicit. I talked to Woolsey this morning, and he suggested getting together. There is an active attempt being made at lower levels of government to sabotage Project Starlight, which was the initiative I started and Lawrence Rockefeller helped fund to bring all these top secret people together and recommend these changes to the Clinton administration. And then he says, this group almost certainly has tapped your phones and is aware of most of the details of your plans. Remember, the most powerful people in the world will have a deep, compelling interest in our activities and will use everything at their disposal to effect their objective. I thought, oh, come on. This is like a bad, conspiracy novel, except this became my life.
Imagine that. He was a doctor. He's living his life. He's seen, as you want to call, conspiracy theorists like me. I've been one for a long time. And I even hate to say that word, but I've been humiliated, made fun of, the cuckoo, the foil hat, whatever. He was a non-believer. He was living his life as a doctor, paying his taxes, believing in his government, and then he found out the truth. And everything, like the whole world just fell in his hands. Like he's woke up. In other words, like when you wake up and you're in a prison, it's just a bad scene. That's why he breaks down, because he can't believe that he's a doctor and they went to him first. Like he shouldn't be involved in that, but he found out the truth, and he feels just like all of us that we need to be told the truth. Why keep hiding it? We already know, no matter how much they make fun of us, we already know. And now they admit it, so it's like, what now? It's crazy.
I think I just became the first president to ever publicly mention Area 51. How's that,
George? Again, clowning.
Based upon what Jimmy Carter has said, and based upon what Bill Clinton has said, that they were refused this information. I believe that is unconstitutional for them to refuse to give the information to the President of the United States.
Many of the Disclosure Project witnesses have had a close encounter with another facet of the structure of secrecy.
People who did not agree with this extraordinary secrecy and made trouble for them ended up having horrific things happen.
He was talking about being erased. And I said, man, what do you mean, erased? He said, yes. He said, you will be erased.
If you tell anyone who is not in this room about this project, this bullet has your name on it and it will find you.
Measures have been taken by agencies to terminate people who appear to be inconvenient or troublesome through knowing too much.
I've had a hell of a time after I've told this story, but I continue to tell the story because I think it's important for people to understand that this sort of shit goes on in the government. That the government covers up information that we are entitled to know about as citizens of this country.
They'll go after not only you, he said, they'll go after your family.
They were like, look, man, we're gonna take you off in a helicopter and just kick your ass out in the jungle, and we're gonna end you and all this.
They were never there. This never happened. When I asked them at the time, I said, well, I don't know why you're saying this. I mean, it's if there was something there, and if it's not the stealth bomber, then it's a UFO. And if it's a UFO, why wouldn't you want the people to know? Oh, they get all excited over that. You don't even want to say those words.
And there have been dozens and dozens.
And this is just for you to try and find out the truth. Now, if you're a witness, you get the Men in Black. I mean, I'm pretty sure you heard about it. I'll make a video about it. So just imagine how scary that is. You get two dudes in a black suit that look not human. And they look at you like they know what you're thinking. They disappear. Before you go out the door, the car is gone and everything. So imagine that, what people have to go through, the ones that have been abducted. Like, nobody believes them. Everybody thinks they're crazy. And you have these people coming and threatening you. And on top of that, you got the government denying it. I just can't imagine what people go through. The ones that's been abducted and stuff like that. Luckily, it looks like they stopped doing that a few years ago. You haven't heard much about abductions anymore. I think that was more in the past when they were trying to like study us, and when the government gave them permission to take us, like cattle. But I just can't imagine the mental stress, and let's keep going.
So, totally, absolutely important, credible people who've had their careers ruined intentionally by the national security bureaucracy because they tried to come forward and fulfill what they viewed to be their duty to report this to their superiors.
3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, midnight, 10 o'clock, people would call and start screaming at me. You're going down, motherfucker! You're going down, motherfucker!
And he just said, look, mister, you don't go in and start any rumors and razzles. Nothing happened out here.
But who do you tell that you were involved in a UFO incident without them looking at you like you ain't wrapped too tight?
One night, somebody blew up my mailbox by putting a big load of skyrockets in it. The mailbox went up in flames. And that night at 1 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. I picked it up and somebody said, skyrockets in your box at night. Oh, what a beautiful sight, motherfucker.
Interestingly, there was a man on my executive committee. He was a very well-known actor and singer named Burl Ives. And Burl Ives, he was a 33rd degree Mason. So all of you people who think that all these secret societies, everyone in it knows everything, they don't know anything. And he said to me, he says, we all know that Marilyn Monroe didn't die of an overdose.
Boop, boop-be-doo.
He said, do you know why they killed Marilyn? Rothberg discussed the apparent comeback of the subject with Kilgallen and the breakup with the Kennedys. This is referring to the fact that Marilyn Monroe had been having an affair with not one but both Kennedy brothers, and it was becoming conspicuous, so they broke it off. Rothberg indicated in so many words that she had secrets to tell, no doubt arising from her trysts with the President and the Attorney General. One such secret mentions the visit of the President at a secret air base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space. Now, this is 1962. Kilgallen said if the story is true, it would be a terrible embarrassment for Jack and his plans to have NASA put men on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The subject repeatedly called the Attorney General and complained about the way she was being ignored by the President and his brother. Subject threatened to hold a press conference and would tell all. It's a tragic situation because she was an actress. She didn't understand the national security state and the viciousness of those who want to keep these sort of secrets.
One of the most powerful elements of the structure of secrecy has to do with the infiltration and control over mainstream media.
It's a media of belief, a media of monopoly. The whole media is controlled by a few corporations thanks to deregulation by the FCC.
Disney, Fox, Westinghouse, and good old GE.
They own networks from CBS to CNBC.
They can use them to say whatever they please and put down the opinions of anyone who disagrees.
We observed firsthand the intelligence community influencing the media when they're trying to cover this story. We have memoranda after memoranda after memoranda citing the psychological warfare and propaganda value of the subject. This is a very important thing for the public to understand. How do you keep something secret? You hide it in plain sight.
And I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft. And I think as a public figure you have to be very careful about what you say, because people can have pretty emotional reactions, and I said my goal wasn't to try to stir the pot.
And now I'll ask Officer Stein and his colleagues to escort the accused into the room so that we may all look upon the guilty party. Don't get him too close to me, please.
In the alien costume, the governor's chief of staff.
Now, this just goes to show that you guys are entirely too serious.
So it's there. Everyone, I mean, there's 5% of the U.S. population who've seen these objects. But you create an environment where the subject is so pilloried and ridiculed that no respectable scientist or doctor would want to be identified with it.
Internal documents from the Defense Department and intelligence agencies explicitly stating that they want to have this campaign of ridiculing and destroying the credibility of completely credible, completely honest eyewitnesses to UFO sightings, and even sightings of extraterrestrial beings on the ground, that they want them discredited. They want their credibility destroyed.
If someone comes out and says, I saw a UFO on TV, the only ones that see a UFO in the TV programs are the rednecks out in the country that are going coon hunting or alligator hunting at night. You don't find anybody with any kind of smarts or some professional individual saying, hey, last night, let me tell you what I saw.
And this officially was released by the CIA, talking about how they have people embedded in all the major media to change, alter, and affect stories to their benefit.
You are fake news.
So every news agency, every television, radio station in the Albuquerque or Santa Fe area had our snitches in there. So we knew, and we paid them. We paid them good money. One of the reasons you get the people is you pay them, and that was controversial. That was somewhat controversial.
Do you know of national media that have had?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm not going to name them.
We now have relationship with reporters from every underlined major wire service, newspaper, news weekly, and television network in the nation. In many instances, we have persuaded reporters to postpone, change, hold, or even scrap stories that could have adversely affected national security interests or jeopardized our sources and methods. And it goes on to then say that they have the same within academic circles.
There's a finding that the Pike Committee made that they had verified 42 full-time Central Intelligence Agency paid employees that were inserted inside the major national news media centers. And most of them ended up being the so-called national security reporters.
The man turned to me, and this is a board member of Time Life, and said, Dr. Greer, we basically are scribes taking dictation from the right hand of the king. The fourth estate is dead.
By the way,
I know reporters for Time magazine who've told me specifically that they've provided the stories and their editors have spiked them.
Yeah, the high-level producers and directors. Yeah.
And how were they paid so that it wasn't?
Cash. Yeah, you pay. What you do is you make them sign a form and you tell them, you got to report this to IRS. But whether they do it or not, you're not going to give your form to IRS. I paid. I better not say. Some of them are large.
If you, Ms. McClain, know of any proof about aliens, you can give it to me, and I guarantee you I will get it out. But I am skeptical.
Based upon my experience representing NBC and representing the New York Times, I know that they will refuse to publish information, which in my judgment is clearly important information for the public to know.
The corruption of the media means that you have then undermined democracy and our basic constitutional protections. Because if you control the information flow through the elite media, and the only place you can get this information is through the tabloids where they want it, because it's discredited there, or on the internet where there's so much false information that's mixed in with the real information that you don't know what to make of it, there creates this complete confusion.
When you go to a supermarket checkout and you look at the tabloids, what you may be reading there are actual stories of actual events, but when it's portrayed through the tabloids, it gets discredited.
And they're ridiculed and their careers are destroyed pursuant to a very specific self-conscious official program.
Now this has worked for 50 years. Why would they change it now? This is the technique they've used.
It is time for the...
And you know what's funny? I remember that. I remember when I was a kid and I went to the grocery store, and I used to see all those like little magazines or newspaper, whatever you can call them, and they always, like, everything that was like out of the normal, I guess you want to call it, it was always it was a joke. They made fun of it, and I always kept that in my head. I was like, why is it that it's always like a joke or some type of comedy? That's why.
The truth to be brought out. Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about the UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe the unknown flying objects are nonsense. I urge immediate congressional action to reduce the dangers from secrecy about unidentified flying objects. CIA Director Vice Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter.
And so we're sort of living in a Truman Show here. Everyone thinks we have a free press. We don't. We have a democratic process where all these sort of sensitive issues would be handled legally. We do not. And that we have an uncorrupted scientific.
Sorry, my nose is sweating from the hot light. There's another credible quote right there. A quote from a credible person, I mean. Well, he's crazy. Ex-CIA. Come on.
Establishment, which we do not and which we will prove.
The structure of secrecy extends to the scientific and academic arenas, where a deliberate effort to spread disinformation has been going on for decades. From professional debunkers to CIA-funded committees, our trusted academics and scientists have been complicit in the secrecy.
A lot of people see something, and a lot of people see things that are really they can't identify, but that doesn't mean it's quite a leap.
I believe that people report seeing things they cannot identify, but after spending 25 years, I've found not a shred of evidence that we have alien visitors in our skies.
Look, this would be the greatest discovery in the history of science. NASA would be elated. Of course, they'd go to Congress to get more funding. Why would anybody cover this up?
Let's do this other little thought experiment, everybody.
Are you going to do this with baking soda and vinegar, Bill?
In 1952, Project Blue Book was launched by the U.S. Air Force to allay fears from the public of ET activity and to assure them that they were doing everything in their power to look into this.
See what I'm saying? A joke, clowning. You can tell the other guy was on the TV right there. They were arguing with him. You can see the frustration in his face. You can't keep a conversation with somebody that's joking about it because they're trying to hide it. Obviously, when somebody gets to that point where they're like arguing with you, they know.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States.
There's been a decision made within the national security state infrastructure to ridicule and dismiss cases that they know positively are cases of genuine sightings of UFOs and extraterrestrial beings. That's perfectly clear.
Project Blue Book was headed up by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, a professor of physics and astronomy at Ohio State University.
Hynek eventually came clean and said we were there to debunk these cases, not to get to the truth and tell the public.
And I know the job they had. They were told not to excite the public. Don't rock the boat. And I saw it in my own eyes.
And by the way, for those of you who just starting to find, like believing, I guess, this is Project Blue Book, not Blue Beam. They're different ones. Just for the ones who don't know. So I want to hear like, oh, we know that. There's haters.
That whenever a case happened that they could explain, which is quite a few, they made point of that and let that out to the media. Cases that were very difficult to explain, they would jump handsprings to keep the media away from them. They had a job to do to keep the public from getting excited.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve.
And by the way, every video you're about to see here is real. No, I can't guarantee you that 100%, but from my point of view, like I can tell a real one from a fake one. All these are documented. They're real UFOs or UAP, whatever you call it. So every video you see here is real. Now compare the real ones to the fake ones, and then you'll learn right away which are the fake ones.
We have lost 100 years of evolution on planet Earth. A true lost century. Huge progress was made in the 1920s as Nikola Tesla developed energy generation technologies that could power the Earth, drawing endless free energy from the so-called empty space around us.
So-called empty space isn't really empty at all. It's actually full of energy. So instead of being like kind of a quiet, empty lake, it's more like the froth at the base of a waterfall or something.
The amount of
imagine that. Where would we be if they use that technology? There will be no sickness. There will be just greed, man. It's just greed. The 1%ers. There will be no suffering, no poor people, no nothing. I'll make a part 2 about this. And if you have any more doubts or not believe, if you still don't believe after this, man, I don't know what to tell you, man. You're just a stubborn person, I guess. This is Rock Bottom of the Dome. Please subscribe, hit the like, I hate saying that, but you know, it's been a long time. You know, I've been debating for a couple of years now if I should start YouTube, and I've been seeing a lot of fakery. I've seen people that used to criticize and, you know, ridicule people that believe in this, and now they're making money off of us. So, you know, I said, F it. That's what made me do it. The same thing with the conspiracy, you know, what was TikTok, a lot of fake stuff, man. We went through a lot, we suffer a lot for us to let other people make money off of us. That's all I gotta say. Get ready for part 2. Thank you.
But in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall.